Imagine a world where half of the United States was essentially off limits for half the year. Less than 100 years ago, nearly half of America was considered too painfully hot and dangerously humid to live in comfortably. It was a harsh, sweaty reality that dictated absolutely everything from where people lived to how they worked. But then, a single invention came along and completely flipped the script. It didn't just cool down our living rooms. This one machine drastically redrew the map of the United States, entirely reshaped our political system, fueled the rise of modern megacities, and fundamentally transformed the global economy. In this video, we're going to dive into the fascinating, unexpected story of how a clunky mechanical device, originally invented just to keep paper from wrinkling in a printing press, accidentally built modern America. America before air conditioning. To really understand the sheer magnitude of this shift, we have to look at what life was like in the mid-19th century, long before artificial cooling existed. Back then, the southern United States was widely considered undesirable, even unlivable during the brutal summer months. The extreme heat and suffocating humidity didn't just make people sweat, it dictated the entire American way of life. Because the climate in the north, from Boston down to Chicago, was much more tolerable. That is exactly where the nation's economic power, population, and political influence were heavily concentrated. Almost all of the early presidents and powerful business tycoons hailed from these cooler northern states. Down south, basic survival required highly specialized architecture. Homes weren't just built, they were engineered to fight the heat. Houses featured soaring 12 to 14-foot ceilings so hot air could rise, giant windows placed directly opposite each other to catch any passing breeze for cross-ventilation, and massive wraparound porches where entire families would actually sleep during the sweltering summer nights. Meanwhile, combating the heat spawned a massive billion-dollar industry of harvesting ice from frozen northern lakes, shipping over 90 million tons of it a year by the early 1900s. The heat was so oppressive that even the US Congress refused to work in it. Lawmakers in Washington, D.C. only held sessions from December to June because the Capitol building became an unbearable, sweaty oven by July. Mortality rates for congressmen were actually higher than the national average. Then, a 25-year-old engineer tried solving a frustrating printing problem and accidentally changed the future. The accident that changed everything. The year was 1902, and a brilliant young engineer named Willis Carrier was handed a highly specific, seemingly mundane task. A printing factory in Brooklyn, New York was bleeding money because the intense summer humidity was causing their paper to swell and the colored inks to run and blur. Carrier was hired to fix the air. His technical solution was pure genius. Carrier created a mechanical system that forced air over pipes filled with cold water. As the air cooled, it dropped its moisture, effectively dehumidifying the room. But Carrier quickly realized something far more profound. His biggest discovery wasn't just that he could cool the air down. It was that controlling the humidity was the true secret to human comfort. Later, while watching fog roll across a train station platform, he had a eureka moment. He realized he could dry air by passing it through water to create an artificial dew point. In 1911, Carrier published the mathematical formula that would become the absolute foundation of the modern air conditioning industry. He had solved the printing press problem and secured his legacy, but nobody, not even Carrier himself, expected that movie theaters, rather than residential homes, would become the technology's very first massive commercial success. How air conditioning took over America. By the roaring 1920s, air conditioning began to step out of the factory and into the public eye, starting with Hollywood. In 1925, Carrier installed his revolutionary cooling system in the Rivoli Theater on Broadway. The result was instantaneous and explosive. People didn't just flock to the cinema to see the movies, they paid for tickets simply to hide out in the gloriously chilled, artificially cooled air. This brilliant marketing strategy gave birth to the concept of the summer blockbuster. Soon after, other businesses caught on. Department stores and restaurants realized that if their buildings were cool, Customers stayed much longer and spent much more money. But the real institutional shift happened in Washington, D.C. In the late 1920s, the U.S. Capitol building was finally equipped with air conditioning. Suddenly, lawmakers didn't have to flee the city in June. Congress could comfortably stay in session through the brutal heat of summer and into the fall. Something as simple as a cooler office quietly changed how the government operated, permanently shifting the federal fiscal year and laying the groundwork for the modern annual budget crises we see today. The biggest impact, however, wasn't just what happened inside these buildings. It was where millions of Americans suddenly decided to live. The Great Migration South. Following the end of the Second World War, manufacturing boomed and smaller window unit air conditioners finally became affordable for the average middle-class family. This sparked one of the most dramatic demographic shifts in United States history, the Great Migration South. Before this, the extreme heat had kept the southern states largely rural and sparsely populated. But now, with the invention of cheap, reliable home cooling, the South transformed into an accessible paradise. Millions of Americans packed up and moved away from the freezing, expensive, and crowded Northeast to seek out sunny, artificially cooled new lives. And where the workers went, the massive corporations quickly followed. Companies relocated their factories and headquarters from the Rust Belt to the South, taking advantage of cheaper land, lower taxes, and the newfound ability to maintain high worker productivity 365 days a year, regardless of the weather outside. This unprecedented boom gave birth to the Sun Belt. As a result, traditional architecture vanished entirely. Gone were the high ceilings and grand sleeping porches. They were replaced by tightly sealed tract homes, entirely dependent on mechanical cooling. As neighbors retreated indoors, the classic American porch culture died out. Modern cities that were once sleepy, sweltering towns exploded in unprecedented population growth. And that massive population shift completely changed American elections. How one invention changed politics, and even Dubai. In the United States, political power is directly tied to population geography. Because of the mass migration to the Sun Belt fueled by air conditioning, the political
Election night
map
updates.
of America
Southern states
was
are
radically
pulsing red.
redrawn.
Data tallies.
Between 1940 and 1980, as millions of people relocated, the South gained a staggering 60 additional votes in the Electoral College, while the North lost them. This immense transfer of political power completely shifted the balance of Washington. It directly fueled the rise of conservative political influence and paved the way for the famous Southern strategy, utilized by presidents like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. Air conditioning literally changed who got to sit in the Oval Office. But the impact wasn't confined to American borders. It went entirely global. Look at the Middle East today. Without the miracle of modern air conditioning, the existence of glittering, futuristic megacities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi would be absolutely impossible in their current forms. These massive hubs of global finance and tourism are built in some of the most unforgiving desert climates on Earth. They are completely, 100% dependent on electricity and artificial cooling to sustain human life and commerce. But every miraculous invention comes with a hidden cost. The problem nobody saw coming. There is a dark side to this technology, an ecological trap that nobody in 1902 could have possibly foreseen. The fundamental physics of air conditioning dictate that you cannot magically destroy heat. You can only move it. To make the inside of a building cool, an air conditioner must aggressively pump hot air outside. As cities grow denser and rely more heavily on AC, they create a terrifying feedback loop. The millions of AC units venting hot air into the streets actually raise the outdoor temperature of the city. Because it's hotter outside, people turn their AC units up even higher, requiring massive amounts of electricity, which in turn generates even more global heat. We are currently utilizing this cooling technology at the absolute limits of our planet's capacity. In fact, the feedback loop has become so severe that in certain extremely hot regions, including parts of the southern United States, we are beginning to see a reverse migration. People are realizing that as the climate continues to warm, even widespread air conditioning might not be enough to save us from the heat we are actively creating. When Willis Carrier was tinkering with water pipes to keep printer paper from getting soggy, he never intended to fundamentally transform human civilization. Yet, that single, seemingly mundane industrial invention managed to reshape the entire world. It redefined how we design our cities and completely altered global architecture. It shifted the balance of political power in the world's most powerful nation, sparked mass human migration, and allowed for the unprecedented economic development of extreme desert environments. It is a powerful reminder that human history isn't always driven by deliberate plans, massive wars. Modern America wasn't built only by roads, railways, or towering steel skyscrapers. It was built by cold air,